Hey, JB.
How are you, Luke?
Thank you, man, for taking the time to do this interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know that I'm doing these interviews for a blues magazine, and I can imagine that not too many people will know you. Could you just give us a short heads up? Who are you? What do you do? What do you make a living off?
Absolutely. I started working with musicians in the music industry 10 years ago. And I was a photographer and a videographer before that, but did various different things. So I committed to doing the music industry a decade ago. And when I got into that, I started working with multiple artists, different genres, blues, rock, soul, gospel. And I came from a documentary background and a journalism background, actually doing photojournalism and video journalism. So I always wanted to find my place in the music industry. I knew it wasn't going to be that of an artist, singer, songwriter, or musician. I was never that talented at that. So I wanted to bring my skill of visual work into music, and that's what I did 10 years ago, and have been doing it ever since then. So I've now, to this day, have done over 200 music videos with various different genres of music, and also produce and direct and film music documentary.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Was it like that from the beginning? I mean, when you were a child, did you already know that this was something that you wanted to do? What kind of family did you grew up in? Could you tell us something about that?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a family of musicians, songwriters, choir directors, symphony musicians, people that played, wrote, composed, sang music. And then my grandfather was a photographer, but just as a hobby. So the music side I had in my family. To my knowledge, I was really the only one that had the visual side, So I grew up singing, in church and various different places with my family and things like that. But as I got older, it just wasn't going to be, I couldn't follow in those footsteps. So I kind of charted my own path with the visual work, but kept to the music. And I think that their background growing up with that and all of them being in music was a heavily influence of me wanting to be in music later down the road.
What kind of music were they listening to?
We were listening to primarily church music, gospel music. That's Southern gospel music. That's what I grew up on. And that's really all I knew. I kind of had a sheltered existence when it came to music because my father worked in the church. So the music that he was listening to every Sunday and Wednesday, that's the music that was always brought home to us. So mostly gospel and church music.
Okay. Did you ever try to play an instrument, sing?
I did. Singing I could do. I tried an instrument a couple of times, anything from the piano. I played the tuba in high school. I was okay at it, and guitar, things like that, but never had much of a facility for it. I could learn a few chords like I think a lot of people could, but just couldn't really grasp the concept. Maybe I didn't have the finesse. Maybe I didn't have the patience. Maybe this or that, but I wrote a few songs and I sang a lot. That was about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that kind of frustrating? I mean, from what moment on did you know that you wanted to do something with photography? When did that happen?
I went to school in New York City to be an actor and to be a director, and it was going to be primarily theater. And then I bought a camera. I bought my first camera, and because I wanted to make my own acting demo reel that I could send off for agents, whomever would take a look at it. And I think that when I made that, I got so engrossed in being behind the camera, working out that aspect of it, that it stuck. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think I might have found something here. I think I might have found something that I enjoyed more. I was doing okay being an actor and a director, but I was still working a day job. I was still waiting tables, and I loved it. I mean, it was great at the time, but when I got behind the camera, there was just something there that I felt like I could go even a little further with and just really enjoyed it more.
What was so appealing about it?
I think the most appealing thing about it at the time, and I think that's evolved over the years, sure, but at the time, I had complete control over the work that I could do. I could sit down and write 2 to 3 scenes and write that and immediately film it and have it and rework it and work it. I didn't have to wait for anybody else, or I didn't have to wait to get a part for another production. I could kind of have control over the things that I wanted to do, and I could also film it. I could look at lighting, I could look at colors, I could look at my wardrobe, and I could try to tell the story the way that I wanted to tell it at the time. I think that control was probably the most appealing part, and that I could have it instant. I could have it when I wanted it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, did you finished high school? Did you go to school to be a photographer, videographer?
I did. I have a degree in photography. I'm a high school dropout, so, but I went to college and have a degree in photography from the University of Maine. So I've lived everywhere, I've been everywhere. So I ended up in Maine, and that's where I did my schooling for photography, and then moved back down south and was a photojournalist for a newspaper for a while, did video journalism up north. I mean, so the degree I really wanted to have, I knew it would help just to kind of have that on paper, but also when I first started doing it, I didn't know much about it. I was a novice at it, and I had some great instructors in college that really taught me not only the visual side of it, but also the business side of it, so I was grateful to have that. So I was grateful for the schooling that I got. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but then in first journalism, documentaries as a choice, or rather as a coincidence because you got work? How do I have to see
that's actually a great question about choice or coincidence, because when I went to school and wanted to do my degree in photography, I didn't know what kind of photography I wanted to do. I just wanted to learn the camera, lighting, all the things that they would teach you in college, just, anything and everything, soak it all in. And then I took a journalism course, and what's interesting is that I was never a great writer, and my teacher knew that, so I always struggled with writing. And she said, well, what are you actually in school for? And I said, well, I'm in school for photography and things. And so she worked at the newspaper in the city that the school was in. So it was during the big boom of digital journalism. I mean, journalism was changing. It was moving from print to online. And none of the photographers that had been on staff for however many years wanted to do video. They were purists, So she said, well, what do you really enjoy? And I said, I really love doing video, and that's really what I'd love to do. So she brought me on board to do just a couple of projects video-wise. And so that really started my journalism from that point, and my love of journalism.
Good.
Yeah.
We'll wait until the train passes.
Or you can insert the train lane.
Yeah, well, I'll make a subtitle. Train passing by. Sorry. Okay.
But I think everything that I've ever done within video, when I first started, was a lot of coincidences.
Okay.
How that all started. People were just like, I've got this. Do you want to try this? And I'd say, of course I'll try that. We're young, we're hungry, we're just starting out. So I did anything and everything that I could. And I think just by doing that and experimenting with many different things, I worked in the marketing department of my college doing video, at the newspaper doing video. So it just really started from there. And then, like I said, in New York, when I first hopped behind the camera wanting to do my own acting reels, that's really when it first started. A lot of coincidences of placement and timing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the same for the career choice to do music videos? Was that a coincidence too, or was it rather?
That's interesting, because that was purely by choice. I had stopped doing video for a while and just wanted to focus on photography. I think I got burnt out a little bit doing video, and wanted to explore a little bit more why I went to school, which was for still photography, and said, you know what, I'm going to put video on the back burner just for a little bit and focus on photography. Well, there were different plans afoot, because that didn't last long. People wanted me to keep doing video. They didn't want me to do photos, and so what had happened with that was I took photographs of a band at a bar in Jackson, Mississippi one night, and after I did their photographs and I was still just focused on photography, he came up to me after the performance and said, will you film our first music video? And I'd never done one before.
Who was that?
This Jason Stogner. He's a country artist,
okay.
And he had a band called the Good Time Band. Jason Stogner and the Good Time Band, and country band in Jackson. And he said, "Hey, we've never done a music video." And I said, "Well, I've never done one either." He goes, "Well, this will be a great fit then." He goes, "Do you?" And I know that you said you did a little video. But he goes, "Will you do our first one?" That was almost 10 years ago. And now, 3 weeks ago, I just filmed and directed my 208th music video in 10 years.
How do you keep up with that busy schedule? Because, I mean, traveling, filming, editing, we'll go into the process a little bit later, but I mean, that is an enormous amount to do.
Yeah.
Full-time.
Full-time, it is. I think how I did it at first, you know, the thing is, I think easing my way into it. When I first started, it wasn't as busy. It was more local. I stayed local for the first 2 years. I never left Jackson, Mississippi, where I was living at the time. And I think after that point, it was a very gradual. So I think that helped. Okay. I would often tell people, you know, some people that I don't know if I could have done it if everything just hit all at once and everybody wanted you everywhere at one time. Thankfully, it didn't happen that way, and I was very grateful. So now, 10 years into it, I think it's at the peak of where it is at this season, but I'm able to handle it so much better. Because of that gradual step up instead of it being all at once. So I think that's the way that I handle that. And now it's like, you can bring it on as much as possible. I mean, hit it with this and everywhere and every which way in any state. I mean, we'll travel all across the country. And now it's just like sliding into it. I think it's become so, I've adapted to it. So we've kind of slid right into it. Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like the life of a musician.
It is.
Mean, traveling all over, doing your gigs, you know,
yes.
And try to keep up with everything.
That's a great point, because I often tell musicians, I feel like I'm on tour.
Yeah.
I feel like I live your life, which is awesome, because that's who you choose to work with. So there's a mutual understanding there as well. Yeah.
So the first music video was somebody asking you to do it?
Yes.
But then you said, I like this, I'm going to continue to do this. I mean, did you always do it as a freelance, self-employed videographer, or did you work for certain companies, record labels? I don't know.
I still do. Most of it is still freelance or contractual work, but I did for 4 years and still do work a bit with Malico Records, which is a big blues, gospel, and soul record label. And then I'm working for another record label now that keeps me in Nashville a lot. And so there are those moments where you will work, even as a contract player, you know, not on staff, but there are those moments where you will work with record labels, management companies, artist development companies that will call you, and you'll work with them steadily. Like the one company I've been working with, the artist development company in Nashville, I've been working with them for 4 years now. So in Malico I was with for 4 years. So that's been a blessing to be able to hook up with companies from time to time. But it's all been freelance, it's all been contractual work.
What, can you give us a few examples of artists that you worked?
Absolutely. So less than a month ago, really excited about, and there's so much to dive into working with Buddy Guy, legend, you know, and I was given the opportunity to go to Nashville and work with Buddy Guy, and for 3 days, and it was an experience like no other. And so there's Buddy, tons of footage, more footage than we'll ever know what to do with. Grady Champion, Grammy winner, Mr. Sip, new Grammy winner. So I've had the good fortune of working with award-winning artists, Grammy-winning artists, smaller award-winning artists, but just encompass Marcus King, Samantha Fish, Jason Isbell. I was chief videographer for a Guitar Player magazine and guitarplayer.com series called My Life in 5 Riffs, where we would go around the Southeast basically and interview these huge artists and talk to them about the 5 songs that influenced them to be the artists that they are today. Worked with Wilco, Luther Dickinson, North Mississippi All-Stars. So we had the opportunity to really do that. And as I said, Buddy was amazing. Buddy was kind of a dream come true. You don't really expect to get that call, and that was kind of random. But that also spawned from one of the record labels I was working with that does actually does blues music. So anywhere from artists that are doing a local scene to anybody who's already achieved and made an impact on the world. Really runs the gamut. You know, that's what I love about it. I mean, you can work with Buddy Guy one week, and then the next week you can go to a small town in Mississippi and work with someone who is just starting off their career and literally is doing their first music video, has only written 10 songs, and they call you because they want you to produce. And there's something there's something awesome about that you can go work with Marcus King and then go work with somebody who the world may know 10 to 15 years from now. And it's awesome to see and follow that development within the young artist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you connect to those artists on an artistic level? I mean, how does that work? Because, I mean, you have the music, that's one thing. You have their way that they look at the music, and then you have you that's going to try to put some light on another aspect of it, I guess. How does that communication go? How does that work?
Yeah, I love that because it is a collaborative effort. First and foremost, we're always bouncing ideas off of one another because they do realize, and I realize, that their job is kind of very different from mine, and we have to find a way to merge the two together. So just like you said, I mean, the song is done. I mean, that, and a lot of times, I mean, you're pulling your ideas and your visual ideas from that piece that has already been created. Challenging, very challenging in its own right, because sometimes you may want to go a more abstract approach with it rather than literal. Sometimes you want to be a little bit more literal. So that's one of the first steps in the process of working with artists, merging the two fields together, if you will, is what kind of approach do you want to take with this? We want to have you in it. Do we want actors in it? Do we want to have you just tell the story? So the great thing about that is these are things that they've never really thought about as a songwriter. They're seeing stuff as they're writing the song, sure, but they're calling you and kind of relying on you to bring all of those pieces together with their musical piece. And then you're sitting there and you're throwing out ideas. And when you're throwing out ideas about their song that you're going to produce a video, one of the wonderful things that I love about it is they start to think like that too. They start to be like, oh, okay, I see where you're going. I get it. Okay, so what if we did this? What if we did that? And I love it when their wheels start turning and they start to think like I'm thinking. You know, and we just keep to that very collaborative process all the way through, even while we're filming. And I work very kind of fast and loose, a lot of improvisational scene building and sporadic creative approaches. They love that because really you're creating in the moment. I may be one of, I don't know, but I may be one of the, I've done, 208 music videos. I've never storyboarded one. I've never had a script, not for one of those. So I take a very different approach when it comes to creating documentary, music video. No scripts, no storyboards. I mean, we're really flying in that moment. We collaborate. We have production meetings. We know where we're going to be, when we're going to be there, if we want actors. But it's really go time when you get there. And I'll look at lighting. If we have pictures of locations beforehand, I try to pay close attention to my lighting and lenses, and all that. But really, when we get there, that's when the go buttons hit, and you just.
It's kind of strange to me that you say it that way, because it looks to me like almost the opposite of what you told me before, being totally in control. I mean, this is a process where correct me if I'm wrong, where you're not totally in control because you're just doing it.
That's right.
You're creating it while you're doing it, and you're not the only one. You have these other people's.
I think that's exactly right. It is interesting because you do relinquish that control when you take that approach. And that's why I said I think at the beginning that was more important, the control was. I wanted things instantaneously. I wanted things the way I wanted them when I first picked up a camera. I think throughout the years, one of the most important things has been to relinquish that control and to realize that you don't have total control over everything. And somebody else's ideas are going to be just as good, if sometimes not better, than your own. We get really close to it, where we want to pick it apart, finite it. Sometimes we get so close to it that we really can't step back and see it objectively. We need that outside approach, and that's what I've always loved now about working with the artist. I will take some of the best ideas on music videos have been taken from the parents of the artist. And I love keeping it open. One of the best ideas that I ever had on a production came from a 7-year-old boy who threw out an idea and just said, "Hey, JB, how about this? What would you think if this?" And I'm like, that's brilliant.
Could you, explain it a little bit more?
I think we were filming in Baton Rouge, and there was a crowd scene, and we had I think about 25 extras for this scene. And the artist was going to be in the crowd, but was going to be at the front of the crowd, walking with the crowd as I was steady camming back, filming him. And this 7 or 8-year-old boy came up to me and kind of tugged on my pants leg and said, "What would you think if the artist came from the back and everybody started walking and the artist emerged through the crowd to the front? Instead of starting at the front, by the time we were done charting the walk, he was moving through the crowd and ended up in the front." And I'm like, and I may have been paraphrasing the terminology of the 7-year-old, but that's pretty much what he said. And I'm like, everybody's set for that. I said, that's what we're doing. So those are ideas that you may not have, but when I run a set and when I run a production, that's what I want. And I allow everyone to throw out whatever creative ideas that they have. And we've found some of the greatest ones, as I said, from parents, kids, people that have never done videography or music directing, and people that have never been a musician. But they love that approach.
Does it always work?
Not always.
Oh.
It does. I mean, the thing is, the idea is always, you always try it. If anybody has an idea, including myself, obviously, we will always film it. No, it doesn't always work. I've had terrible ideas, and some people have had really bad ideas that just don't. And it's just kind of, and then I will take at that moment, say, because of your experience, say, well, I like that, but that may not work because of this or that or that. So it doesn't always work. But it's amazing when it does. But we will film everything.
Do you take that process of cooperation that far that you involve them in the editing of the movie too, or is that something that you still want to do by yourself?
Yeah, I've edited with a few people. I've actually sat and edited with just two that I can think of, artists over the decade, for very special reasons. One of them was because the artist themselves was interested in editing. And that's something that he had always done just as kind of a hobby and just for fun. And he actually would edit some of their live videos and things that artists will do these days. And he's like, can we just sit and edit? I mean, I'd love to just see the process and edit. It actually turned into us sitting together and editing. Every time we do a music video, we always sit together and edit it. So it turned into that. So I do think that there is that control that you relinquish in editing, although in the editing process is also like when the cinematography comes together. You want to correct your exposure. You want to make sure your color and and everything, and you want to make sure that in the editing you're also bringing out the best of your camera work. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think experience does need to take over, and that's a little bit less of a loose process, and that gets a little bit more to a technical side. Like when we're filming, I will choose lens choices and lighting. It's the ideas of the production. It's the ideas that we'll grab from the outside. But I have to know, based on my education, it's like I have to know if a 50 millimeter or 85 millimeter is going to be the best lens. Other people aren't going to know that are just, so you have to be able to be knowledgeable to make those choices. I think editing is the same way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to like their music?
It helps. It helps. I like working within any genre. I've taken on some genres of music for productions that I wouldn't particularly listen to on a day-to-day. Wouldn't really be on my playlist or radar. But you do have to like the song. There's got to be something about the song that appeals to you, because understanding that when you're listening to their song and you're trying to put a visual mark on it and a visual piece, you are looking for certain things that are going to make that happen. You're looking for pace changes in music. You're listening for key changes. You're listening for anything that's going to drive the visual and that's going to excite you about doing that. And so you have to have a level of excitement about the song that you're listening to. As I said, would it be one that you may listen to every day? Maybe not. But there's something about it that's like, I like this song though. There's something about it that resonates with me. And then sometimes I've had a few productions where I'll take on a different type of music, and I'll end up, that'll be one of my favorite genres to work in. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is your personal preference as far as music goes to listen to?
Any kind of rock music, okay. Soft rock, hard rock, even some heavy metal. I've always been kind of steeped and well versed in any kind of rock music. I would say first singer-songwriter. Acoustic-based rock or folk rock. I've always loved that. I've always resonated with rock music of any genre. Gospel music. because I was raised on it. So there was something about that that stuck with me even as an adult. So I actually still enjoy and listen to a great deal of gospel music. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And blues recently.
Why recently?
Well, coming into the blues was actually a very kind of coincidental, because I was not introduced to blues music until I was 38 years old. I'm 43. I was sheltered growing up, as I said, and even when I moved out of the house and moved away, I moved up north, New York City, Maine. Blues wasn't really a thing up there, so I didn't really know what it was. I'm sure there were obviously people doing it, I mean, because it's known all the world over. But I just had not, and I certainly had not heard of Mississippi Delta blues or Chicago blues or any of the different kind of subgenres within blues. 38 years old, I was really introduced to the blues.
Who introduced you? What was the eye-opener?
The eye-opener was, well, and I remember I was introduced to a Mississippi artist named Wes Lee, and a friend of mine had let me listen to Wes, and I just kind of immediately took to it. I was like, this is very different. And so I listened to it for a while. He was the first one that I really listened to of the blues genre. And then she had also invited me to go see another local Mississippi artist that was playing live. And so I went and saw him, and actually saw Wes I listened to on CD, and then I went and saw this guy live, and he's stomping with one foot, and he's got a one-man band going on, and he's acoustic, and I'm like, okay, this is a little similar to what I heard in Wes's. You know, I'm like, I'm okay. This is cool. And then I got introduced to Mr. Sip on Malaco and started working with Malaco, and you know, they were like, you know, Tommy Couch Jr. was like, well, I want you to work with Mr. Sip, one of our artists here. And I heard that Mr. Sip was kind of a more Chicago blues, had a little bit of kick, like, you know, electric, and he's a fantastic guitar player. I got introduced to that. And I think it was that, but coming from rock music, when I heard the blues have a little bit more punch and drive, and I see this guy up here, Mr. Sip, and went and saw him at the Bottleneck Blues Bar in Vicksburg, and then listened to his records, and then worked with him, and I'm like, now I really like this blues, because he's up there playing his guitar like a rock musician. It's got a sound, and but it's similar to Wes Lee, like it all kind of had, and I'm like, I love this. And then there on out, I got to work with Grady Champion, kept working with Mr. Sip, Buddy Guy, Marcus King, Samantha Fish, then started North Mississippi All-Stars, started working with these blues artists, and that actually now has become one of my favorite genres of music to work in, and to not only listen to, but to also work. And they are just phenomenal people and phenomenal artists in the blues genre. They have lived what they sing about. And I love that too, blues as a songwriting standpoint. They're phenomenal writers, guitar players, and there was something so pure about their songwriting. I was like, they've lived it, they have walked that walk, and their music really resonated with me, and I think it really could resonate.
How do you take lyrics of a blues song and make a video out of it? I mean, I can imagine that singer-songwriter material is way more descriptive, film-like, movie-like, if you want to. Mm-hmm. How does that go with blues and blues lyrics and blues songs?
Sure. Blues, for me, I've actually found, because a lot of times with their lyric, you know, that I've been able to do more creatively with blues.
Why?
I think because a lot of times they leave very little open for interpretation. Their lyrics are on the surface. You know what they're singing about. You don't have to interpret it or really sit and think about what does that mean. You know what that means, at least as a listener. They may have written, they may have it, and you do take an interpretation, but it's like it is so hard hitting on the surface that I actually think that allows you to be even more creative lyrically. You don't have to tell something that's just overly literal. You can tell something that's a little more abstract. Blues music to me has always had this mysticism, this Robert Johnson at the crossroads, this selling of the soul, mysticism, smoke, light, but very roots and the wide open expansions of the Delta all the way down to the smoky bars of the city, that there's just something, I think, visually and with their lyrics, but also visually with the whole vibe, that is actually, for me, I think turned out some of the more creative pieces, because you can have more fun with it, you can take those literal lyrics, and you can tell a more abstract story with it, and the vibe can be so cool, so dark, but refreshing. And I think that works a lot with music video, is that you're able to take something that seemingly is a little more simple lyrically and turn that into something that really could hit hard visually. Yeah.
Is that the added value that a video can bring to a song?
Yes, absolutely. That adds a lot of value. Yeah. Yeah, when you can really cut loose and turn something into, because I think the value that it adds and what a part of our job, my job is that you've really got to work hard, and you really do have to know a lot about lighting, technical, lenses, color, movement, blocking, how a musician moves, how your people are going to move in the scene. I think all that you really have to know those things, because especially within genre, each genre being different, but and too, like in blues music, because you have to work all of those things to pull out the vibe. If you're not on point with your lens choices, your lighting, your colors, and everything that you can create within the world of their song, I think something's going to be off. You have to know about that thing, and that's why I think the education and my degree was important. I wanted to know about that even before I got into music. How does something resonate with people? If you're going to cry or laugh or be inspired or stomp your foot or be on the edge of your seat about something or feel any kind of resonation or sense of urgency, I have to have the knowledge to be able to put you there in that space. And I think that any of those things adds value to the production,
How would you describe your own style as a videographer?
Very organic. As a journalist, as a documentary filmmaker, I love capturing the moment and I don't want to miss it. So I have a tendency to film a lot handheld. Set my lighting, set the lenses, set where we're going to be, and then just allow people to move around that space and allow me to work within that space, a lot of times on a shoulder mount or some kind of handheld device, so that people do some wonderful things sometimes that you don't want to miss. So I try not to stay too stagnant with tripods or anything like that that'll hold it down. So my style of filming, a lot of times what you'll see, kind of darker, kind of moodier, handheld, lot kind of shaky camera, depending on if it's for the moment, but kind of broodier, I love dark and moody. There's something about that. I love working within that. We can brighten it up when it needs be, but I really just love the thrill of the follow. And I think that coming into music video from journalism and documentary allowed me to think on my feet very quickly. So if there's something I need to catch, I want to make sure that I'm mobile, So you'll see a lot of that in my productions as far as in style goes. and then often coupled with harder light. I love spotlights and harder light blasting through the back of the camera to accent the frame. But yeah, so I think it's taken me 10 years, and it's a lifelong pursuit to learn a style or try to develop what we call a voice. I think maybe I've hit the midpoint. We'll see in another 10 years if it's a little more identifiable. Yeah.
Maybe just one more thing. Would it be possible for you to take one experience, one music video that you made out of it, that you could say you liked the most for whatever reason? The end result, the way that it went, the difficulties that you had, just one experience, and maybe explain a little bit why you chose that one.
Let's do blues.
Okay.
Is that, yeah, let me, because I've done some great, you know what, I'm gonna have to talk about Buddy Guy.
Okay.
You know, I know it's my most recent blues artist to work with, but there's something about producing and working with him for those 3 days, not only in Nashville, but in this historic studio in Nashville. Watching Buddy just in his element of working the way that he does, being able to not only talk to him a little bit, but to also focus on him and what he was doing at the time. Not only is it kind of a dream come true, it's you really are standing next to a living legend within that genre of music, and I think he crosses other genres too. And so being next to him, being able to follow him filming, being able to be up close and personal, following his every move for those 3 days, and as I said, being able to see him work the way that he does in its rawest and truest form, where there is no, you're at the mercy of whatever is around you. You know, no big setups or anything like that. That probably right now in 10 years has been my greatest experience working with an artist. My most different experience working with an artist, especially an artist of his caliber, to where a lot of times we don't get to see artists like that coming out of a hotel room and coming and sitting with you an hour after or however long after they've had their breakfast. I mean, and they just make their way, and it's totally unplugged and unstripped, and to have that freedom and to be able to have that opportunity to work with someone like that, doing what I did, I think I can go ahead and count that as probably my greatest experience and accomplishment thus far. I mean,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea when we're going to see the result of that thing?
I think the results will trickle out little by little.
Okay.
I will tell you this, and I don't know if I can. And the only reason I don't know if I can really say this or not is because Buddy may pop up next year and want to do. So what I got to do was I got to document Buddy Guy in the studio for 3 days, recording his very last record that he will ever record.
Cool. How cool is that?
That is amazing. But the thing is, Buddy may pop up next year and be like, you know what, I want to record one more. So it's like I was like, well, can I actually say that? Because that right now, what we did is what we did, but who knows if Buddy may want to do another one. But that's what I did. I mean, and what the result is hopefully a documentary of Buddy Guy's last ever recording. Not only for release at some point, but also for archival purposes. I'm the only one in the studio who was there for 3 days filming. I'm the only one who holds that footage. I'm the only one who will ever have that experience of documenting that one moment in time. I know Buddy is heading out for his farewell tour, which he has named, the farewell tour, and this is supposed to be his farewell record. So to be a part of Buddy Guy's last ever recording that he may ever do, and to be the only one to document that, I think that's really what sealed the deal, becoming my favorite project. The results of it, we may see little things here, little by little, depending on what I may have permission to do. And I know that I've heard that there may be another documentary produced about Buddy from a company, so they'll probably want to come call for that footage. So I would turn over that footage to them so that they could include it in their documentary. We're under the impression people are going to want this footage. I mean, and I have it for always. And other people, we may see it pop up on Netflix or Amazon in a larger documentary at some point one day. The experience, and what's interesting is that when we talk about a true once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I think that that's what that was, because you may never, ever get that again. And that is a true once-in-a-lifetime, and I think that is one of two once-in-a-lifetime opportunities in the past 10 years that I've been able to be a part of.
Cool.
So,
thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
What does next year look like? Do you have plans? Do you have projects that are already?
Yeah, I mean, for 2024, I mean, as far as in the rest of this year, I know we're still early in it. It's been busy, and it's been a much faster pace at the beginning of this year than it was even at last year. It can be so different year to year. Thankfully, the past few years, it's been very consistent. There's always editing to do. I think right now there's more editing to do than there are projects to go out. I usually stay booked about a month and a half, sometimes 2 months in advance. Right now I'm booked about a month in advance because we are coming off, I think a lot of people wanted to do at the beginning of the year. So now you take a lot of amount of work that you filmed, and so there's going to be editing probably for the next couple of months, but within that we'll start to film. There's a couple of companies that I'm always consistently working with. Sometimes they call at the last minute and want to put you somewhere, but I think it's going to stay busy. And if we have a little break from filming, which is always a welcomed break because we can get a lot of editing done. Sometimes it's hard to edit in a hotel room all the time because you've driven 10 hours, you're tired, so when I can be at home and just be able to focus on editing, I love that too. So there's always work. It's just what you choose that you need to do or want to do at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is, if there's not scheduled work, I have a tendency, like the documentaries, a lot of the documentaries that I've started are when there's a lull in the schedule of people calling maybe to book you. I'll be like, well, I'm going to make a documentary and I'm going to call and get somebody. I'm going to call them and say, I love your story. Tell me more about your story. I'm working on a documentary right now in Texas. He called me for a music video, and he told me his story behind the song. And I said, I don't want the music video. I said, I want the documentary. And we just wrapped it, and it's going to be about a 30-minute documentary that we'll hit the film festivals with. So at those times, I love turning something into something greater if it's appropriate and it calls for it. And I've done that many times that have led to working with that artist for a couple of years. And so there's always work if you want it. You can always say, let's do this, let's try this, let's take that, let's turn it into something bigger, let's do. So I think that's what that's what I always like to do. Yeah. At the end of May will be my first overseas project, another country. the Bahamas, which is another country. You know, I mean, and I'm excited about that, and that'll be my first other country work. I've filmed in 43 states, so I think it's time to go do this, and I think that's going to be awesome. So we're going to film a lot of it on a cruise ship, and then when we actually get to the islands, we're going to film for 3 days on the islands. So I do have one artist that I work with consistently from Switzerland. The thing is that I work with him when he comes over here to do tours. So I have worked with and including you, I've worked with a couple of international artists, but for the most part, just right now, I work with them when they're over here. But I have worked with international, but I haven't had a chance yet. Not that I haven't been offered a couple of times, but it just hasn't worked out schedule-wise to be able to go across seas yet. Well, another interesting part, kind of the way that I work, I was telling you about the no storyboard, no script, you know, is that I don't market and I don't advertise. I work by word of mouth and referral only, and I've done that. I wanted to do that when I started my career. You can find me on Facebook at JB Lawrence, and a lot of times I will post work there as a cross-release with the artist. I have no website. I don't carry business cards. You can't find me anywhere else because I made the commitment to not be anywhere else 10 years ago, and I wanted to see how referral and word of mouth would work. I know it was a risk, especially when you're just going to work in the music business. You're like, well, I don't want to do weddings, I don't want to do this videography, I'm only going to do music, and hey, guess what, I'm not going to advertise for it. It's like, I knew that was going to be a challenge to essentially work in one area and to not advertise, but I am on Instagram and Facebook where some of my work is there, and we'll post about work that we have coming up, but I call it indirect advertising because I never price or ask people to, hey, give me a call if you want to do your project. I was always, if you want to do a project of any kind of project, anytime anybody calls me, it's always because, hey, this artist told me about you and said call you, and I love that, and that's what I've maintained for 10 years. So other than Facebook or Instagram, you won't find me anywhere else. I keep very low profile and very low key, and there's something exciting about when somebody calls you to produce a project that they say, I heard about you from this person, and I love that because that means that I think you're respected in the area that you work in because people are referring you. Maybe I would take a different approach if nobody ever called me. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Well, I may not be the most pleasant guy to work with or something. I don't know. I think that from a blues standpoint, to be honest, European artists I work with in Switzerland, that the European people have such an amazing understanding of American blues music. It's always fascinated me how our artists from America can be 3 times as more popular in Europe than they are over here. And any time that I talk to Europeans, their knowledge of blues music and American blues music, and even all the way down to Mississippi Delta blues, you know, and how they will come over from their country and do the blues trail and visit the juke joints. And they know about it, and they know the American artist, and they respect and adore the American blues artist. I've always admired that about Europeans. I've always admired that about people from Africa, about people from Australia, from other countries that I've met. There's something about blues music that I think we can all connect to. I think we've all have sang the blues, have written our own blues at some point in life. I think the blues artists do such a wonderful job of having it resonate. You know, but I've always been impressed by that. I've always been impressed by how well American blues has been received and how they talk about it. Yeah. I tell you what, I struggle with this. That's a great question because I actually was thinking about that recently. I never had any children. And I was talking to a friend of mine, just real quick, but I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about a legacy. Just what you said, and leaving something behind. And I always said, well, I never had kids. And I know how important sometimes it is that people will talk about their children or their legacy. That's something that they can leave, a bloodline. And I was like, I wonder if I'm missing something. And I started kind of to feel down a little bit because I never had children, and I like children, I do, but I never had them, and I was concerned that when I was gone, what would I leave behind? And he turned to me and he said, you never did have kids, but what you do is your legacy. Your work is your legacy. I mean, that's okay to leave behind that. That's not selfish. If you want to think about leaving your work as your legacy, and I guess I've thought about it, but I haven't. That resonated with me. I try, I guess, not to think too much about it, but if I had to be remembered or, to leave something behind, I would say that it was that people, that they trusted me. Trust, determination, not only a legacy of the physical thing, but a legacy of the emotional, and I think the way that people would talk about me. And that they would say I was always treated fairly. I could always trust JB. It didn't matter if it was this artist first starting off, you're treated like a rock star, no different than Buddy Guy. I've always wanted to give everybody fair and equal treatment. You'd get 200% of me if you were Buddy Guy. You'd get 200% of me if no one had ever heard your name before. So I think that legacy of being kind, being trustworthy, being the guy that you could go to when you were just starting off to take you to the next level, or being the guy that you could go to if you had already made your stamp on the world because there was something about me that you just liked as a human being. So just being a good human being. And then the visual work, hopefully that will live on forever. But I guess if we're all dead and gone, But yeah, I mean, I know that may be a little esoteric. I know that may be a little, maybe that's not, I guess just maybe nothing physical to focus on, but more of the emotional and just what kind of person, how did I make you feel? What kind of person was I that you'd want to talk about or read about or write about or anything like that based on knowing me rather than maybe seeing something that I did? The guy that would try to turn something into something bigger, would take this and be like, you know what? Let's do something. There's something bigger, there's something better that I want to sit and think about for a day. So JB being the guy that would always sit and think about what you were doing and always want to make something bigger out of it. I guess that's the long ass run around of the answer. But yeah.